Let's get to the featured. I don't want to call it a story. It's not so much a story more
Yeah,
than anything.
I'm
but,
actually really excited about talking about this. Like, I wasn't sure that I was going to be at first, but I totally am now.
right. So this week we have an independent comic review.
Yeah, absolutely.
We read Vengeance Nevada, written
Issue
by
number 1.
issue number 1, written by Vijay Mendelsohn, with cover art by Isidore Colaveras.
That's a good attempt. I like it.
Coliavraz, I believe that's
Caliavras?
closer. Sure. With interior art and letters by Peter Chaplarski, which I'll be a little transparent with you guys. We were approached to review this comic by BJ Mendelsohn himself, and I believe he probably listened to a few episodes prior, because when he sent me the information, he put in the email the pronunciation for the names. So I appreciate
That's super
that.
smart. I feel like I'm more well known of the two of us for being able to spell and to pronounce names correctly. But I probably would have done a hack job on that one too.
But I do appreciate that. Anyway, being a little transparent and letting you guys know what's up. But to this book, I don't know where to start. I don't really know how to describe it. I don't really know to where to begin, because we do have a lot of takes on this book. Matt, you want to...
Let me just first talk about the author.
it?
Vijay Mendelsohn is he's a keynote speaker, he's an author, he's somewhat of an activist. He has 2 books out: Social Media is Bullshit from St. Martin's Press, and Privacy and How We Can Get It Back from Curious Reads. Like a super interesting guy, and it seems like when you look at like pictures or like anything he's written, he's like a super nerd like us, which is super great to find, like a comic written by a nerd intended for nerds, like that whole thing. So
and
like,
you can pick up on that when you read this as well.
Yeah,
There are
absolutely.
some really great references. But continue.
Yeah, so I just thought it was important just to like build up the author, because he's doing a lot of different things, which is something that I always aspire to do myself. Like, motivation is like a big it's a big thing to me. Like, I try to stay motivated at all times. I've had my feet in a lot of different waters. Like, I've been a screenwriter, I've made short films, I want to do this comic book idea that we talked about last week. We podcast. I've done podcasts before. And I just always try to stay active and doing a lot of different things. And I really admire people that do that too. So this is right up my alley, like somebody that, like, to full disclosure, I want to like whatever he does.
Fair enough. But to the actual comic at hand, though, I will admit the first read through left me very confused.
Yep, totally full disclosure there as well. I think my first words to you were, man, I'm really confused. This is really fast-paced. I don't really get what's going on.
Right. But we both read through it, and we were like, okay, we really don't understand what's going on. Did we miss something? Is there's something we didn't pay attention to? We went back through it again, and it kind of opened our eyes a little bit. And then we went through it again, and we're like, starting to connect the dots. And I want to say that this is one of those books that it's going to take a read through a couple times before you really pick up on some things. And it really leaves out the unnecessary BS that a lot of comics put in, trying to over-explain things.
It's not gonna spoon feed you like other comics do. Like, you have to be looking at the panels and looking all over the panels, because there's contextual clues to what's happening that they don't necessarily tell you. But if you look hard into it, you're gonna be like, okay, yeah, there's something going on underneath the surface here.
Exactly. And it's also one of those things where it's shrouded in mystery, I guess you could say, because when you're reading through it, like you said, it's not spoon-fed to you. There's things happening that there's no explanation as to why they're happening or what's going on. It's just there. Like, for example, you're reading through the first, I don't want to say the first couple pages, because the first few pages are what they are, but you get to like page 3 or 4, and it starts like with this phone conversation, and the speech bubbles are the phone conversation, but there's underlying things going on behind it.
Right. So where you might where you might be reading like a DC or a Marvel comic book, and when you get that kind of speech bubble type thing where like this is a conversation and these panels are going to relate to that conversation, but it's not what's actually happening. Now in this version of what they do here, the speech bubbles have to do with something completely different than what's happening, but you can pick up on it. Like there's contextual clues there that tell you things about what's happening. But if you're not really paying attention, or if like you're eating Chinese food and trying to read it, like somebody did today who will remain nameless, you're just not going to pick it up. You're going to have to reread it 2 or 3 different times. But I promise you that if you do dig into it, you're going to find something really cool in there.
Right, and that's part of where I wanted to go with this, is that because it's not cut and dry as to what's happening, it had caused Matt and I both to really dig into it and kind of look around and try and put things together. It was almost like a puzzle. I know at one point you and I both picked up on the beginning where the character is singing a David Bowie song.
Yeah, it's Life on Mars by David Bowie.
And the character starts off that seems kind of possessed, or I don't necessarily know what to call it.
So I don't think that you really get that from the beginning until you get to the end. Like you have to reread it once or twice to really figure out what's going on. But then if you go back to the beginning, there's a whole different meaning to the beginning few pages of the, like in a lot of comics, especially in issue number 1s, the first few pages are sort of irrelevant. They're just kind of like setting like a basic scene. I can't think of too many that kind of make the first few pages relevant. Like issue number 1 of Walking Dead. Good point out there in terms of like you should be reading from the first part of the series.
Right.
But this, like the first few pages kind of feel like just, I don't want to say exposition, but they feel unimportant until you get all the way to the end and you're like, wait a second, now that all makes sense, because it didn't make sense the first time I read it. But then I got to the end, and then I reread it again, and then I reread it again, and then the beginning I was like, okay, wait, now I'm putting the pieces together.
Right, so the character starts off singing that Bowie song, and then we go into a flashback scene where that song is also playing on the radio of said scene. And it's I guess technically the same character. I'm not even sure because of the way that this book is written to leave us questioning things.
And I had a certain interpretation of that as well. I thought that it was the same character, but you don't realize what's actually happening with the character until you read the whole thing.
Right, exactly. But that just goes to show, like, I really, like, my opinion of this book changed drastically from the first read to the third read.
Which is awesome to have when you're like reading a comic book, because it gives you incentive to keep going back to reread it again and again and again.
Right, exactly.
Because you can put new pieces together every time you read it.
Exactly.
Things start to make a little more sense every time.
And I'm one of those people who tends to, I guess I read through things awfully quick, but I'm also one of those people that, like, when I know, like, or when I can't see things adding up, I'll sit there and I'll study a page for a good 5 minutes.
And I don't think a lot of people do that, though.
No, and I think that's become part of the issue with people reading comics, is that they don't take enough time to appreciate the details or the contextual clues within the artwork. Because I notice a lot of comic book writers, or creators, I should say, anymore, don't leave everything up to just what the character's saying or the dialogue to hint towards things. It's like TV anymore, where there are visual contextual clues that they leave there for the reader to pick up on. And if you're just skimming through it and just reading the words, you're going to miss a lot of that.
Yeah, so I'd highly recommend with this one that you do not do that. Why don't we give like a basic outline of what the story is about, though? I think that's important that we do before we reach the end of our segment.
I think you got a little bit more of a grasp on it than I do.
Sure.
So why don't you go ahead with that?
The basic outline of the story, and I'm not going to go deep into spoiler territory because I really want you to pick this book up and read it. It's $2.99 right now on Comixology. That's Amazon's comic book platform. So that's where you can go to read this book. It's basically about like this main character's a female, which is super awesome to me. I like, even when I've been screenwriting, I usually use a lot of female lead characters. She's like a sheriff, or like a sheriff's deputy. She's patrolling like through, I guess, like the border of California to Nevada. And of course, Vengeance, Nevada. Oh, he said it. Like the
real
Peter
quick,
Griffin.
I do want to say real quick, even though Nevada is mentioned in the title, everything I've seen happens in California or just outside of Nevada, which makes me believe that.
I think the one panel, there's the sign that says "Now entering Vengeance Nevada."
Yeah, but she's right on the border. Nothing ever happens in Nevada, which leads me to believe that either something massive happened in Nevada.
Well, see, here's kind of where I went with that. Have you ever seen the film Legion?
Not that I recall.
So they kind of hint towards like in the story, they kind of hint towards like this intergalactic like battle that happened at some point between like alien races, and I feel like they're almost like implying that like Vengeance Nevada has like significance to the story, or Nevada in general. Like maybe that's where this battle happened. Because if you were gonna have a fight between sinners and saints, why would it not happen in Nevada?
Fair point.
So I'm extrapolating a little bit there, and I'm just giving what I think is going to happen because I have not read more than one issue of this book. It's about like the sheriff, and like, you know, life is very simple for her. Like she just drives around, she has a kid, she has a husband, but like nothing ever happens. That's kind of the feeling I get from it. Like it's very routine. And while she's driving around the desert, she comes upon like a figure in the desert, and she chases them, and then something really weird happens. Then there's like implications of like possession and things like that. So I don't want to give away too much, because if you say too much about this book, I think it would give away like, I think the number one factor of this book is the mystery. Like that's why you should keep reading this book, like to just find out what is going on. So I think if I reveal too much, it kind of takes the mystery away. I feel like you should read this for the mystery.
I would say also that it feels like there's like any and every genre feels represented through this book too. From horror to sci-fi to superhero to, you know, mystery, it all feels involved here.
And you know what?
I would also say, hold on, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're all right.
But I would also say that it feels like the journey that the main character takes through this particular issue feels somewhat of akin to like a Ghost Rider.
Sure. Yeah, I could see that. I feel like it's sort of going a different way, though, and I'll give you my take on that when you're done with your point.
Well, I mean, that wasn't something that I picked up initially on my own in doing some research and trying to find, you know, other reviews and some more information on this particular book. I did come across, I believe it was a blog post from BJ himself talking about how he was starting to write this book, and there were, you know, elements of Ghost Rider and whatnot in the character, and I kind of picked up on that after he mentioned it. So I can see that, and once you read it, you'll probably pick up on that too. But yeah, I mean, there's so much more to it than what you might think.
I think that based on the way the way it ends for me, the cliffhanger they give you at the end of issue number 1, it almost feels like the main character that we think is supposed to be like, you know, you automatically get this assumption when you read a comic that your main character, or who your implied main character is like always a hero. I think in this book, like there's going to be a lot of shades of gray in terms of, you know, the main character might be a villain in this. Right. And I think there's more villains. Like it's kind of like a dissection happening in this of like a dissection of the perfect life. Like you think your life is perfect. You have a great husband. You have a kid that you love. And you have a job that you kind of do nothing on. It's nice and safe, but it's like a different job. Like it's a deputy, a sheriff. But your perfect life isn't the life you thought it was. It's like a superhero, sci-fi, like American Beauty. Your perfect life is not your perfect life. And, you know, when I was looking at it, you know, we both picked up on the David Bowie thing, so I did a little bit more, you know, I don't think anybody can really perfectly sum up what life on Mars is, but I found an article written by Neil McCormick in June 2015 for the Daily Telegraph, where he basically breaks it down. He ranked this at the time as his number 1 song in his 100 greatest songs of all time. He's the music critic for the Daily Telegraph in the UK. Gloriously strange sci-fi anthem, a stirring, yearning melody combines with vivid poetic imagery to accomplish a trick very particular to the art of the song, to be at once completely impenetrable and yet resonate with a personal meaning. You want to raise your voice and sing along, yet Bowie's abstract cut-up lyrics force you to invest in the song with something of yourself just to make sense of the experience, and then carries you away to a place resonant with intense individual emotion. The magic and mystery of music and lyrics. It is something to behold. And I kind of feel like that's how I felt about this book, to be honest with you. The abstract cut up lyrics, you can't make sense of what Bowie's saying, like, so you can't sing along with it. You can't read along with this comic book thinking it's like every other comic book.
Right. There's not really ever a chance to really like take hold of it before it's something different, I guess is the best way to explain that. There's not really anything for the reader to really latch on to before.
You can't compare it to existing
else.
Experiences that you have with comics.
Right, exactly.
Like, you have to go along with this ride, and you have to put in some of yourself to give personal assumption of where you think it's going to go. And it's not going to be what you expect even then, which is sort of like anarchistically beautiful, I think, in a way. Like, you have to go along for the ride with this one and experience the mystery as you go.
Right,
I think it's generally how I feel about it.
Right. I think we should also mention the stylistic choices of the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you start off, the book is in black and white with the very specific details of the character's eyes and word bubbles in blue. Then we continue through a completely black and white book, I think, until it's about like page 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
Where that mystery character comes along and is in complete color. And then there's elements that are in complete color, while the main art through the rest of the book is black and white, which leads you to identify that this character has some intense presence.
Right, there's something unique and different.
Right. And while at first I wasn't a big fan of it, to me it felt, through the first time reading through it, like I said, it took me a minute to grasp this book, that it felt almost half done. But once I realized the significance of the particular character and the way that it played through, it felt really bold and really creative to make this particular decision for the use of color within the book. So I applaud the effort of everyone involved on the book for that decision. Like I said, it really made that particular character stand out and feel like something very important.
Which is clearly what they wanted. And just from talking about our own project, that I'm very prone to I like the black and white comic style. I think it works really well for somber stories and stories that are supposed to generate emotion, because you kind of, like what we were just talking about with comics, you kind of, the Rick and Morty comics specifically, you kind of tend to fill in the blanks on your own. So you're kind of given this open palette to decide, this is a world of, I don't know, the sky is red, the sky is gray. You don't see necessarily blue skies all the time. And I think that's why I like black and white so much. And I think that the black and white works for this story. I think it would work even better than maybe adding any color whatsoever. But I do like what you're saying about it. And I feel kind of the same way now that you pointed out, that it implies significance. It draws your eyes to what you want the reader to draw their eyes to. And I think that can be used for great effect later in the series. And I don't know how far along he is with this series, but I think it can be used for great effect in terms of distracting the reader's eyes to one part of the panel and not noticing what's in the other part of the panel where the secret might lie. You can use it as a great storytelling technique.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't think about that myself. But yeah, I mean, I'm just sitting here paging through it right now, and I noticed the part where that particular character comes in, where color is introduced, that it's just like you almost have entirely white pages up to that, with the exception of a few pages that have some really thick black borders and whatnot on them. But everything is very white to that point, and then that character comes up, and it's very, I don't want to say startling, but to see that amount of color come in at one time when everything was so washed out, for lack of a better term there, but when everything was just so white before, it's very startling, and it's very in your face, and it really draws your eye to that.
Which is supposed to be the point,
spot.
I think.
Yeah,
that character is supposed to be in your face, I think. So I think it's done really well. And again, like you said, at first I didn't really like it that much, but as I reread it, I thought about the storytelling implications and what you could do with it, and about how, like you're saying, the feeling of trying to get that character to feel special, to feel important. It would be like if Marvel decided to make, Infinity War again, but they only made Thanos the colored character. It just feels important. It feels bigger when it's in color, when everything else is in black and white.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It really does make that particular character pop.
Overall, what would you give this rating wise? Like, let's put it out of like 5.
Out of 5, I'd probably go with a 4.
I think I'm there. I think I'm at like a 4, 4.5. On the first reading, transparent. To be transparent, probably like a 2 on my first reading. But then after I reread it several times and I started seeing the things that I missed, definitely shot up for me. Like, there's way more intrigue than I thought there was on the first reading. I think it's super good. It's super creative. I think there's a lot there. Now, again, with any comic, when you read an issue 1, there can be a lot of potential in the first issue, but it's what the author and the artist do with that potential that really defines how good the comic can be. So I think this is a great start, and I think they can really go some really interesting and fun places that comics don't typically go from here. So again, 4, 4.5. I think it's really interesting. It's a comic that I would consider buying at the $2.99 price point on Comixology because I find it so interesting.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with you there. I really I was really lost with it, like I said when I started, and almost just completely called an audible and decided, I don't know that we're really going to talk about it as much as we had intended to. But then, like you said, we both did that digging and we put part of ourselves into this book and, started connecting the dots and trying to figure out things on our own and making our assumptions for where we think certain things are going or what certain things mean. And it really left me intrigued to keep reading or to go back and reread the book. And then, like, that last page with the, I don't want to call it a team, but I guess it's a team. This reveal.
You get your superhero fix in there too, where it looks like you're going to.
Right, and then you got like elements of mythology in here and all kinds of stuff. And once I put it all together and I really got into it, it left me really intrigued and really wanting more. And I really hope it's not long before we see the second issue.
Yeah, 100% agree. Final thought from me. I've never been happier in terms of a comic book to be wrong about something on my first opinion.
Right?
Yeah.
I completely agree with you there too.
Yep. So you can find Vijay Mendelsohn, the author, at bjmendelsohn.com and on Twitter at bjmendelsohn, no spaces.
And of course
again,
we're going to link.
We'll link it all in the show notes, and you can find the comic on Comixology, Amazon's comic app, their comic page, for a $2.99 price point.